Well, thank you very much for staying with us. Now we're on the second half of TVC Breakfast this Monday, and let's move on. President Bola Tinubu has signed an executive order on oil and gas reforms to improve the investment climate and position Nigeria. Well, his task is to reposition Nigeria as the preferred investment destination in Africa. The president initiated the amendment of the primary legislation to introduce fiscal incentives for oil and gas projects, reduce contracting costs and timelines, as well as promote cost efficiency in local content requirements. Well, the president's directives include the introduction of fiscal incentives for non-associated gas, midstream and deep water developments, the streamlining of contracting process to compress the contracting cycle to 6 months, and the application of the local content requirements without hindering investments or the cost competitiveness. And we have joining us now energy specialist Aderunke Onodeko joins us via Zoom. Good morning, and thank you for joining us again on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Right. What are your thoughts on these three executive orders signed by the president? How optimistic are you that they will be the game changer as desired?
Well, there are multiple things that they have planned to do to maximize the benefit, to make sure Nigeria becomes the destination of choice for investors, and also to encourage local investors to invest in Nigeria, because obviously we know that we're seeing a lot of capital flight out of the country. So the advantages of this executive order are obviously, first and foremost, the fiscal incentives that would encourage investments, both local and international, and also to increase the volume and the depth of exploration, production, and most especially at this time, infrastructure development. When I talk about infrastructure development, we know we are more of a gas country than an oil company, but we have more oil assets, more oil infrastructure in Nigeria. So moving gas around the country is still a challenge. Meanwhile, we are having people who are exploring, tapping their gas because there aren't infrastructure means to move it around, to dry it up, to store it. So that's definitely a major focus of the government to ensure that we begin to aggressively develop infrastructure, especially for gas. Another advantage of the executive order is it will also reduce contracting cost. And how that works is if somebody gets a contract today, we're all aware of how the exchange rate has been moving. If you win a bid today and you're going to start implementing in 3 months or 6 months, the cost would have doubled. So you have to come back to government to renegotiate, to make sure that there's an allowance for all of these fluctuations. And this affects contracts, the people who are coming to bid for contracts significantly. So if it's a country where once a contract is done, work can begin immediately, the timelines are short, the period of approvals are short, then you can keep closer to the cost of your contract. So that's another thing that this executive order is supposed to address. Lastly, is the promotion of local content. The government want to see more local people on jobs, local use of material. We need to start doing a lot of, how would I put it, a lot of investigations to find what things can be substituted so that we are not 100% dependent on importing people, importing goods and services, importing imports. So if there are certain inputs that can be found locally, how can we start to mine them? How can we start to aggregate them to ensure that that also brings down the cost and the timelines for our jobs? On everything that has advantages obviously has disadvantages. On the disadvantage side, we don't want to overexpose Nigeria to fiscal incentives that would make everybody rush into Nigeria because of the fiscal incentives, whereby the revenue going to government is reduced. Because what the fiscal incentives does is you do give tax holidays, you give rebates, you do reduce costs and things like that. It's attractive, it will bring people in, but the flip side of it is that the government will earn less revenue. So we have to find a balance in between wanting people to come in and ensuring that it is still profitable and beneficial to the government in terms of revenue. Also, in the area of balancing local content and cost, sometimes we might say we want to mine a particular thing we have locally as opposed to buying it abroad and bringing it in. The cost of mining is not cheap. The infrastructure to get it done at a cost efficient might be more expensive than us importing. So how will the government manage the development of the local mining or local sourcing of material? While we're still importing, we should start developing and building capacity in those areas so that at some point in time, maybe we are moving from 80% importation to 20% local content, and we begin to grow the local content part till it's outweighing the importation, and we are doing more locally than importing. Last but not the least is implementation challenges. As we all know, it's always nice to have a good plan. This is how it's going to work. If we do not pay particular attention to the implementation of all of these things, we will not get the benefits we're looking for. If you look at the deep offshore, you look at the non-gas midstream, all of those things need specialized people who are disciplined. So we have to have checks and balances. We have to have ways and means of checking to ensure that the plans that we have made are time-bound, and we're checking to ensure that, and also that the costs do not run away with us. We don't want to come back in a year's time and do a review. So have they put periodic implementation plans and checks to ensure that the implementation plans are being followed and the value is being met? Those are the things that we really need to keep our eyes on to ensure that we get the full value of this work that the various ministries involved in the oil industry have put in place.
Okay, so you've spoken extensively, especially on the issues of implementation, and you've raised your concerns regarding that. But are you also concerned about the bottlenecks and the fact that will this ensure that gas is cheaper for Nigerians to purchase so we can easily move from other sources of energy to a more cleaner source?
Well, this is the gas decade in Nigeria. The focus for government, for all the energy and natural resource ministries is very gas focused, and we are a gas nation. So that is really where we should be focused. So on that, everybody is aligned. The issue of making gas cheaper is now based on how quickly can we attract international and local investment to start to ramp up development of infrastructure, specifically around gas. What incentives are being put in place for people to do more gas than oil? People are more likely to go in the oil direction because the infrastructure is there and it's easier to pull through. It's a shorter contract time as opposed to gas. So what we need to be looking at now as a nation is how quickly can we shift people's attention away from oil into gas. And then when we put the funds there, we need to have timelines of what we would have achieved in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years, so that people who are interested in a particular part of the value chain will know when the entry point will be, because such and such infrastructure will be in place at that time. So there has to be a clear map for the gas, like there is, and there also has to be a dashboard. So I would really like to see that the government have a dashboard of, over the next 5 years, these are the things we expect to happen in the area of gas. This is how much investment needs to come into the country. These are the kind of companies that need to come and start investing. These are the kind of projects we need to see. And if all of this, the money's coming, the projects are being done, these are the different points where different companies can come and start exploiting. Then we can start seeing how we would move the price of gas cheaper and get the gas to the last point on the value chain, which is into homes, into industries, into vehicles, and also for export on the continent.
The president, through this latest intervention, is also speaking about clarity, so to speak, or clarifying the job of the regulating bodies, especially in the oil and gas sector. And we've always been talking about, how corrupt reading the system is. How hopeful are you, once again, that this will also sanitize the system, especially in the role that government bodies play?
Well, and we have all the policies, we have all the regulators, all of that is clearly drawn out. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. But if we do not have a system where the timelines and the expectations are clearly stated, then we cannot hold anybody to non-performance. On the issue of corruption or negligence or lack of competitiveness, we need to look inwards. All of these things are doable. There are things that are achievable. But if we don't start to find scapegoats that we hold accountable and people see how scapegoats are dealt with, nothing will change. The needle will not move. We have done all the right things. We have put all the right things, policies and regulations in place. We have the right attitude and we have said the right words. But the competitiveness, the corruption, all of those things are things that we need to find people who violate these things, bring them to book so that people know that it's not business as usual in the area, that we're taking this seriously and we're taking it a notch above. So I think it's important that the government continue to reiterate this, and they should call to book people who are violating this thing and not make some people sacred cows, whereby a particular company or a particular group or a particular industry is allowed to get away with things that truly violate the rule and are affecting the Nigerian economy and the livelihood of Nigerians, because the money that comes from the oil industry is what is supposed to support education, healthcare, right, infrastructure, security. So anything that goes wrong or isn't done properly in this sector has a multiplier effect that is disastrous for a nation that is growing.
All right, Mr. Onodeko, we'll take a break and want you to be put on hold, if you please, and we'll return to continue with our conversation. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We have been speaking with Aderonke Onodeko, an energy specialist, about the President Bola Tinubu signing 3 executive orders to boost investment in oil and gas. Aderonke, I also want you to speak about up till now, the non-viability of, the gas hub, especially, there's been, this projection that we have so much, gas reserves, but then we are not doing so much with it. What are your thoughts on how we can break this jinx?
The importance of gas cannot be overemphasized for Nigeria. We are more of a gas-producing nation than oil, but the focus, obviously, over the last 30, 40 years has been oil. I'm hoping to see the government bring together investors in the gas sector specifically. First and foremost, the ministries should find some great evangelists to go around the world where gas is being taken seriously. And let's go back out there and retell our gas story. We need to get the world excited about the potential of gas in Nigeria. And we also need not just the government officials to go. We need them to go with commercial entities that are the beneficiaries so that they can tell their side of the story. I find out that the government is doing a lot of work, but they're not carrying along the relevant stakeholders in their discussions, in their briefings. I'm not seeing the commercial side of gas being sold. And I think that's a very critical part of our gas story. We need industry experts to go out and say, you know what, I'm producing this at 10 naira. If there was gas available at my doorstep, it would reduce the cost to 10 kobo. Because in some cases, the cost of power is the major cost in production. So we're seeing multinational companies leave the country. It's causing people to lose jobs. So you can see the multiplier effect of having a robust gas structure, because it will affect, our generators. If gas is being piped into homes, then homes can go on cleaner electricity supply. The electricity companies can get more power. So it's just across board that we would benefit from a robust gas plan. So I think it's high time that we went back to the drawing board. The government, the stakeholders, the regulators all come together, form consortium, send people out to Europe, send them out to Asia, send them out to India, send them out wherever, and tell our story. We need to click onto the international news and hear the Nigeria gas story being told. repeatedly till it's familiar, till people are familiar with it, both at home and abroad. Until we do all of these things, we're not going to get the cohesion. And it's not just one company or two companies coming in. We need an amalgamation of many companies coming in to do the different aspects of what we need on the value chain so that we can quickly see the results and the report. And if we do all of this, we'll find out that we're using cleaner energy, we're having less health challenges because pollution is causing a lot of havoc in the health sector. We will see reduction in cost of production of goods. People will be able to buy more for their money, and we will see inflation begin to wind down. So there are a lot of things that have, a tie to our gas plan and the gas framework. So I really think the government needs to take this a little bit more seriously and, act accordingly.
So if the government needs an evangelist, I'm sure they will look for you at their own care, of course. That's on the lighter side. But looking at the issue of compressed natural gas, are we doing enough to get people to convert their vehicles from petrol to gas?
Well, until we can prove that we have a stable supply and that we are doing it in a sustainable way. For example, I would buy a gas-powered car or convert my fuel, car, my petrol liquid fuel car to gas. But I need to be sure that there are filling stations that can fill me across the country, in every nook and cranny. And that's going back to infrastructure, building the infrastructure development around gas. What if I do that conversion now and then in 6 months' time, they say, the pipeline, the single pipeline that's bringing gas to Lagos is not, has been broken into, or there's a problem on it. What do I do? That means I cannot move around. So people are going to be reluctant to move until they start to see the infrastructure development that's going to support those things. So CNG, yes, we can move it around in large trucks to offices or to businesses, but what about the day-to-day use for people? Those things have not been addressed. I don't see a lot of places where you can go and fill up your car with gas.
And
so until those things
obviously
are
you're not convinced. You're not convinced as we speak with the present infrastructure provisions.
Well, I would say that I'm not convinced. I know that the restructuring is high on their agenda, but we need to start seeing them put things in place to show that they are following the plan, that the plan will continue to be followed, and that it's going to be something that is done in a sustainable, long-term manner. So I'm excited about a cleaner environment. I'm excited about the possibilities. It's going to bring about more jobs. It's going to bring more expertise into the country. It's going to even help us export gas to our neighboring countries. We saw how countries like Cameroon, Republic of Benin, and Togo were reliant on our petrol and our diesel when the prices favored them. It was cheaper in Nigeria than in their country. That will happen with gas if we get our gas plan right. So we will be able to do commercial things with our neighboring countries, Niger, Cameroon, Togo, even as far as Ghana. So I see a lot of upside to this, but we have to have a plan. We have to have a dashboard where everybody sees what's going on, when money is coming in, where money is going, what developments are being done, and how this is going to continue. We don't want a situation where it's done for 4 years and, perhaps a new minister comes in and has a different agenda. This is supposed to be our gas decade. We're supposed to be talking gas, 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 and more gas.
Okay, so in all of this now, do you think all of the executive order signed by the president will ensure that we become a gas nation in less than 4 years? Is that a possibility?
I don't think we will become the top country in gas in 4 years because it's a very capital-intensive venture we're going into.
True.
It's going to take time. We have to build expertise. We will make mistakes. No trajectory just goes upwards continuously. There'll be ups and downs. There'll be issues that we would have to deal with. There will be changes, global changes, that would affect our plans, that we would need to come back to the table and reorganize ourselves to continue to have an upward trajectory. But implementation challenges are surmountable. There is no challenge that is insurmountable. So if we focus and we put the right people in the right places, we speak the same language, and we're consistent in our messaging globally, I think we will get there in a shorter time. They said it's a gas decade. That's 10 years. So let's look at it from a 10-year perspective. Let's start with the small wins, the low-hanging fruits, and then we begin to deepen and widen our reach to ensure that in the 10 years that we have apportioned, we get close to maximum value and destination as soon as possible.
So 10 years, seeing that we've implemented it to the latter, we're good for 10 years.
Right.
Right, Roge?
Pardon?
You're saying 10 years, based on the fact that we implement everything we have put in place to the latter.
We might not implement everything, but we will go very far. And Nigerians will begin to reap the dividends of the work the government is planning to do if we're consistent with our messaging and we really put our mouth where our money is and put our money where our mouth is.
All right.
Right. I know you've spoken extensively on this subject, but in terms of low-hanging fruits, the immediate deliverables, do you think this executive orders fit in nicely, within that picture you're just painting?
If you look at the different ministries and parastatals and government agencies that were brought together to put the plan forward before the president's executive order, you will see that they have gone through the length and the breadth of the industry. So all the right people have been brought to the table. However, there are more stakeholders than the government agencies, and they need to be dragged into this at the early stages, so that no one is sabotaged, no one feels left out, no one feels sidelined. Right,
and then, okay, right. Just finish that thought you were sharing just now.
Because you can have a robust plan, but if you don't have the right people at the table, you can walk down the road and find out that because you didn't have a particular person's perspective, what you're aiming to do or you're trying to achieve will not be achievable because of certain peculiarities on the commercial side or on the financial side. I'll give a quick example of that. If a Nigerian organization goes out now, maybe a government parastatal goes out now to try and bring in money, they need a sovereign guarantees in place so that investors coming in are sure that when they're ready to take their money out, they have access to foreign exchange. So CBN needs to be brought in. People who have done those kind of businesses know the peculiarities and the difficulties that they have achieved or they have, encountered. So those are the kind of things I'm saying that let's bring everybody, not just the government, to the table. There are investment bankers that need to be at the table. There are companies that need to be at the industry needs to be at the table. Big estates that would use this gas need to come to the table to say the kind of policies and the kind of programs that the government can use to incentivize people to do these things. So I think we need a larger stakeholder meeting or meetings, as the case may be, to ensure that all these plans are workable, they are realizable, and they're relatable to the various stakeholders.
All right.
All right, Ronke Onadeko, we say a big thank you for your contributions on TVC Breakfast this morning. Many thanks indeed.
Thank you very much for having me.